Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Kines 365 podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Valona. On today's episode, we'll be talking about goal setting, specifically aimed towards new head football coaches at low-income high schools. The specific problem that we're going to be looking at is effectively integrating into the athletes' or students' lives and understanding the role of responsibility personally as a head coach in this context. So, to give a little bit more context, according to Pew Research Center, 1/3 of kids are living in a single-parent household, and over 80% of those households are single motherhood households. And according to the U.S. Department of Justice, kids that grow up in fatherless homes make up 71% of all high school dropouts, 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions, 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers, 75% of rapists motivated by displaced anger, 85% of all children that exhibit behavior disorders, and 90% of all homeless or runaway youths. So, I'll be speaking to you, coaches that are in this situation, and maybe we can help shed some light on what will help you integrate into these athletes' lives. So being a coach to a fatherless athlete as he enters high school, you may be the last influence he has to keep him from screwing up his life. You will fill in that father figure role. When you apply for this job, you are accepting that responsibility. Wins and losses hardly matter to these kids. What they're really looking for and striving for is that fatherhood figure, whether they know it or not. So, why set goals? In short, it helps these young men focus on one thing that they can control and strive for. This will not only build confidence from the satisfaction of reaching a goal, but they might live in a world of chaos, and having some specific goals to strive for will bring more order to their world, lessening their anxiety and allowing them to reach their full potential not only in athletics, but in school and in the real world. Additionally, as a coach and mentor, you can direct the skills and lessons you want your athletes to learn through goal setting. As the saying goes, it's the journey, not the destination. The lessons and skills learned happen during the journey. An easy format to follow for goal setting is the SMARTS goal setting acronym, SMARTS, and that stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, timely, and self-determined. Now, through the majority of this episode, we will be working through that together. So let's start with specific and measurable. Make your athletes choose goals that are specific and can be measured. For example, in high school football, one of the big events that everyone compares themselves to is testing day for max lifts and fastest 40s, etc. Let's take an athlete that wants to increase their bench. Have them focus on this, write down his max bench at the beginning of the spring or summer training so we can compare at the end of the summer training how far he's progressed. That specific goal is now bench press over X amount of time. The secondary lesson that is learned here, and maybe the more important lesson, is discipline. That in order to reach his goal, he's going to need to show up every day and work out, whether he wants to or not. He's going to have to follow a plan, work hard, and he's going to have to learn that hard work is going to be worth it. And this is going to help build his work ethic. That same discipline and work ethic can be applied to school, to his future career, and it's going to be a lesson that he may not learn at home. It's going to be a lesson that can keep him off the streets and help him not become one of those statistics that I listed earlier. Now let's move on to the A and the SMARTS goal format. The A stands for action-oriented, and this tells us to focus on achieving success rather than avoiding failure. Returning to a football example, instead of telling a lineman to focus on not letting the quarterback get sacked, tell him instead to focus on making every block. This is the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy, which can be summed up by a quote from Henry Ford that says, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." This helps remove the negativity from your athlete's mindset, helping them change the way they think entirely. Translating this off the field into a secondary lesson, you can help your athletes reach their personal goals. For many, it's just getting out of the community and entering the middle class. Most of the time, that avenue is through college. When none of their family members have gone to college, and some of your athletes' parents didn't even graduate high school, it can seem like something impossible. But setting that action-oriented goal of I will pass my classes instead of I hope I won't fail my classes. I will graduate high school. I will score well in the SAT. I will stay away from violence on the street. That can make all the difference. Alright, now moving into the R in the SMART goal format. The R stands for realistic. Help your athletes set goals that are going to be challenging, but you know that they can reach. This will vary from individual to individual. One athlete may have no self-confidence at all. He'll probably need shorter-term goals with low levels of increase as his confidence builds. If you give that athlete a goal too big and too spread apart, they will become frustrated that they are constantly failing or that no progress is being made, or progress isn't being made fast enough for them. Other athletes may think that they're the next Deion Sanders with all the attitude that comes with that. They'll need larger goals, and if they fail, their ego can take the hit if they don't reach them. Knowing your athlete is crucial. The secondary lesson that comes from this is confidence. Many of the kids in your community will know plenty of hardship. They can learn to expect things to not go their way. But by setting realistic goals and the athletes meeting their goals will start to build their confidence, which is a good feeling. This will help create an upward cycle where the athlete can learn to turn away from the failures made in his community that he sees every day and forge a new path for himself through his own goal setting. Moving on to the T and the SMART goal format. T stands for target dates. This refers to the specific dates for athletes to plan their goals. Going back to the increased bench example, the athlete could start his goal the day spring or summer training starts and plan it so he tests 1 week to the day before the regular season starts. This way he has hard dates to set for his goal planning. For example, say spring training started May 15th, and he can give himself a 3-month period, so August 15th, that he's going to test again. In front of everybody, the whole team and coaches, he is going to test 3 months later, and that is his responsibility. It's on him. A secondary lesson for this is learning not to procrastinate by keeping the goal in front of the athlete. An example of this would be having the athlete do their homework that's due for the week or the next day during the hour in between school and practice, or in the morning during study hall, depending on how the school and practice are scheduled. Regardless how you do it, every day the athlete is doing some schoolwork. They're doing homework, and what this teaches the athlete is, again, that discipline through repetition, and it shows them in real time the steps they're taking to reach their goals. As we talked about that before, those secondary goals, secondary to athletics, but primary to their life of going to college, going into their career or trade school. They will know that every day before or after school, they need to have their homework done in order to go to practice. And after a while, it becomes habit, and you as a coach won't even have to hound them that much about it. Lessons like this translate greatly to the freedom of learning in college and in a career. So we are at the end of the SMART goal format. The last letter in it is S, and it stands for self-determined. What this means is that each athlete has to see their goals as their own. So my advice to you is sit down with each athlete. Yes, it's going to take a while, but figure out their goals together. Throw in a suggestion here or there, but ultimately allow the athlete to set their own goals. By doing this, they will see their goals as their own responsibility and work that much harder to achieve them. If they just see them as your goals or the team goals, it's easier to give up. It's easier to slack off. It's easier to ignore. But if it's their goals and they write them down and it's in front of them and they do everything else that we've talked about during this podcast, it's going to be so much harder to ignore it. And this will increase the chance of them reaching their goals, and it gives you an increased chance to make a real impact on your athletes' lives. Alright, that is all we have for today's episode. Tune in next week. Every Wednesday, we go through a different topic. Again, this is Adrian Valona for the Kines 365 podcast.